Common Benson was 39 years old, and for 11 years he had been the quiet architecture behind a life his wife took full credit for. While Ariana Benson climbed to her partner at a downtown marketing firm, arriving late to dinners and leaving early for red-eye flights, Common had built their home from the foundation up. The actual concrete he'd mixed himself this summer, they poured the patio. The actual wiring in the converted garage. The actual mortgage payment made on time every single month for 11 years running. Even the year the firm laid off half its junior engineers, and he picked up night work reviewing residential. Permits just to keep the numbers steady. He designed retaining walls and load-bearing frames for a living, and he had applied the same discipline to the marriage itself quietly, without asking anyone to notice. He never complained. He never asked for credit. Then came the Tuesday morning that changed everything. Ariana stood in the kitchen, holding her phone with both hands, her face lit with a kind of joy Common hadn't seen directed at him in years, maybe not since their daughter was born. She had matched all 6 numbers in the state lottery drawing. $512 million, before tax, the largest jackpot the state had ever paid out. She was already on the phone with a lawyer before Common had finished pouring his coffee, her voice climbing into a register he recognized from her biggest client pitches. By Thursday, she had changed the locks. He found out standing in his own driveway with a bag of groceries, his key useless in a cylinder that had never resisted him before. What Common found when he looked closer, 3 days later, sitting in his brother's guest room with his laptop open and the house quiet around him, was a single-line item buried in the State Lottery Commission's public claim verification page, a purchase timestamp, a retailer identification number, and a rewards account number that had never once, in 11 years, belonged to Ariana Benson. Ariana had built her victory on a fatal assumption that Common was too quiet, too steady, too easily replaced to ever notice what she had taken from him. She had never once imagined he might actually check. She had never been more wrong in her life. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. Common's world, before that Tuesday, lived inside a narrow brick house on Halsey Court in a neighborhood called Fenwick Park. The kind of street where the maples had grown tall enough to close over the road in summer, dropping their shade in long, cool stripes across the sidewalk by 9 in the morning. His office was a converted garage at the back of the property, a drafting table set under the north-facing window for even light, blueprints pinned in careful rows along a corkboard wall. The smell of pencil shavings and machine oil from the old bandsaw he kept around for weekend furniture projects. He liked the particular quiet of 6 in the morning, before the rest of the street woke up, when he could hear the sound of his own thinking, without anyone needing anything from him. Every Sunday for 11 years, Common had taken his daughter Priya to the corner store 2 blocks over, a place called Denny's Mini Mart with a hand-painted sign and a bell over the door, to buy himself a coffee, her a grape soda, and 1 lottery ticket, using the same 6 numbers every single time. His late father's birthday, June the 4th, and the 4 digits of the house number where he'd grown up on the other side of town. It was a ritual so small that neither of them thought of it as anything more than habit. He swiped his rewards card out of muscle memory, the same card registered under his own name and his own phone number since the store's loyalty program launched, never once thinking to question why he kept it. Ariana moved through the house that spring like someone who was already living somewhere else. She was polished in a way that had begun to feel rehearsed rather than natural. Blazers pressed the night before, voice pitched for a client call even at the dinner table, eyes flicking to her phone between bites. She barely looked at Common when she came home from work anymore. She looked at her phone, at her calendar, at whatever version of her future she was already quietly building without him. What neither of them ever discussed, what sat undisturbed in a shoebox at the back of Common's office closet, was 11 years of ticket stubs, rubber banded by month, never once thrown away, a habit belonging to a man who never threw away paperwork, because paperwork, in his line of work, was the only thing that ever told the truth later. There was a particular Sunday, the spring before everything changed, when Priya had asked him why he always played the same 6 numbers instead of letting the machine pick random ones like other people did. Common had shrugged and told her that random didn't mean anything to him, that he liked numbers with a story attached, numbers that belonged to someone. She nodded like that made perfect sense, the way an 8-year-old accepts most things her father tells her, and gone back to shaking her grape soda to make it fizz louder at the counter. Ariana wasn't there for that conversation. She was rarely there for the small ones anymore. The locksmith's van was still idling in the driveway when Common pulled up that Thursday evening. Ariana stood on the porch with a manila folder pressed against her chest, her posture straight, her voice already lawyered into something clipped and final. She told him the marriage was over. She told him she'd consulted an attorney. She told him his things were already packed into 2 suitcases sitting by the garage door, as though she'd timed the whole thing to the minute. She said the ticket had been hers, purchased on a lunch break at a gas station near her office downtown. She said it the way a person recites a fact they've repeated to themselves so many times that it started to feel true even to them. Then she turned and went back inside, and the door clicked shut behind her with a sound Common felt somewhere below his ribs. He did not raise his voice. He did not follow her up the steps. He stood on the porch for a long moment, and something in him went very still. The particular stillness of an engineer standing over a hairline crack in a support beam, doing the silent arithmetic of load and failure before saying a single word about collapse. It was not shock. It was not paralysis. It was assessment, and assessment was the only language he trusted right now. Common drove straight to his brother Desmond's house that night, and, from the guest room, opened a shoebox he'd quietly taken from the closet in the 90 seconds before the locksmith finished the last lock. 11 years of ticket stubs, rubber-banded by month, sat in his lap. He found the stub matching the winning drawing date in under 4 minutes. Then he pulled up the State Lottery Commission's online claim portal, which by law published verification data for any prize over $100 million, a transparency measure almost nobody ever bothered to read. The purchase record listed a rewards account number ending in 4471. He opened his own rewards app on his phone. The number matched digit for digit. The retailer identification matched Denny's Mini Mart, Register 2, the same register he had used every single Sunday for 11 years without once thinking about it as evidence. He kept going. A joint bank statement, still accessible through an old shared login Ariana had forgotten to close, showed a payment to a family law office 6 weeks before the drawing. Not 6 weeks after, 6 weeks before. A billing memo from attorney Renato Jacques, dated in April, reference consultation on asset division and non-marital claim structuring, a full month and a half ahead of a ticket Ariana claimed and bought on a whim. Common sat with that for a moment, the number 4471 glowing on his screen. And then he picked up his phone and called the one person he trusted with all of it. He thought, for just a second, about calling Ariana instead, about walking back into that house and laying the printout on the counter and asking her, plainly, how she thought this was going to end. He decided against it almost immediately. That conversation would happen eventually, but not until he understood the full shape of what he was dealing with, and not until it happened on ground he'd chosen himself. I need you to come by tonight, he said. Bring your laptop. Everything okay? No, Common said, but it will be. Desmond arrived at 9 that night with his laptop bag and a legal pad already half filled with notes from the drive over. He'd spent 11 years as a forensic accountant for the county, and Common had shown him worse spreadsheets over Sunday poker nights, but never one with his own name buried inside it like a splinter. They spread the shoebox contents across the kitchen table. Ticket stubs, the rewards printout, the bank statement, the Ojukwu billing memo, and Desmond worked through it the way he worked through anything, slowly, methodically, cross-referencing dates against a blank timeline he built in a spreadsheet as he went. Common called Ariana that night from the guest room, with Desmond listening from the hallway. His voice shook, deliberately, precisely, an exact register of a man coming apart at the seams. I don't understand, he said. I thought we were building something. Ari, I love you. Please, just talk to me, please. The relief in her voice was audible the instant she answered, unmistakable, because she had never once had to imagine him capable of performing anything. After he hung up, he set the phone down on the drafting table, and the shaking stopped instantly, like a switch thrown in the dark. Desmond looked at him from the doorway and said nothing at all. In the quiet converted garage, surrounded by 11 years of blueprints he had drawn and never once been thanked for, Common sat perfectly still. It wasn't defeat. It was the beginning of everything. By the next afternoon, Desmond had the documents spread across the kitchen table like exhibits at a trial, each one indexed with colored sticky tab: rewards account, retailer ID, ticket stub, the Ojukwa billing memo, the bank statement. He'd built timelines like this for the county for 11 years. He could read a paper trail the way Common read a stress diagram, instinctively, without needing to be told what mattered. She retained a family law attorney 6 weeks before this ticket was ever drawn, Desmond said, tapping the April date twice. That's not panic. Panic doesn't have a paper trail this clean. This is planning. He pulled up the retailer verification page next, turning the laptop so Common could see it clearly. And this account number right here isn't close to yours. It is yours. Common didn't say much. He didn't need to. The numbers were saying it plainly enough on their own, the way a stress test finally confirms what a hairline crack has been suggesting for weeks. I know someone, Desmond said, closing the laptop halfway. Preeti Anand. She handles high-value asset disputes, the kind where the money attached actually forces people to pay attention. Want me to make a call? Do it, Common said. But tell her I don't want to move on anything yet. I need everything documented first. All of it. Desmond nodded and started dialing before Common had even finished a sentence. The way he'd always done things, quietly, without ceremony, already 3 steps ahead. He'd been the best man at Common's wedding 11 years earlier, had stood up in front of everyone and said Ariana was lucky to found someone who'd never once make her life about himself. Sitting at the table now, surrounded by the paper trail of exactly how that generosity had been repaid, neither of them said anything about the irony out loud. They didn't need to. 2 nights later, Common drove back to the house he still legally owned and let himself into the garage using his own key, which Ariana had apparently forgotten to change along with the rest of the locks. In the bottom drawer of his drafting table, behind a false panel he'd built into the woodwork himself years earlier for exactly this kind of contingency, sat a manila envelope Ariana had never once asked about in 11 years of marriage, a consulting contract with a structural review firm in Charlotte, signed under his registered business name, Benson Load Analysis, LLC, worth $340,000 across 4 years of weekend and evening review work she had always dismissed. When she thought of it all as his little hobby, she had stopped asking about his work somewhere around year 6. If he was honest with himself, she had stopped asking about most things around year 6. Common spent the following 2 days on the phone with old contacts from that Charlotte relationship, engineers and project managers who still remembered his name and his work, even though his own wife apparently hadn't bothered to. 3 firms responded within 48 hours with renewal offers, one of them larger than anything he'd taken on in years. His professional network, quietly maintained through 11 years of being underestimated at home, was still fully intact, still functioning, still valuing him in a way his own kitchen table hadn't. He stood over the desk that night, looking at the rewards account printout, the ticket stub, the consulting contract, and 3 new emails from firms wanting him back. And he said out loud, to no one in particular, just to hear it land in the empty room, I was never small. You just stopped looking. He thought briefly about the year he'd signed that Charlotte contract, the same year Ariana had told a table full of her co-workers at a holiday party that Common did some freelance stuff on the side, nothing major. He remembered smiling and letting it go, the way he let most things go, because arguing about it in front of her colleagues had seemed smaller than the work itself. He didn't feel that way anymore. The work had never been small. He had simply chosen, for 11 years, not to make anyone else's indifference his problem to fix. Ariana called on a Sunday, her voice warm again in a way that felt almost convincing, wanting to sit down and sort out logistics before things get messy. She picked a wine bar downtown, the kind with exposed brick and a chalkboard menu, clearly chosen to project a certain kind of composure. When Common arrived, he ordered her a glass of the same Sancerre she'd always preferred, without needing to ask twice, the way he'd done 100 times over 11 years. She smiled at that, genuinely pleased, and read it exactly the way she wanted to read it, as him quietly coming around to her version of things. She spent nearly 20 minutes describing what she called a fair arrangement, a modest settlement, the house sold and split, a school schedule managed around whatever new life she was already imagining for herself. Common nodded along. He asked two careful questions about the custody timeline. Nothing more. He said, "I just want what's best for everyone," and meant almost none of the way she heard it. Later that same night, through a contact Pridiana had quietly secured, Desmond obtained a text exchange between Ariana and Renato Giaccu sent 20 minutes after Common left the wine bar that evening. Ariana had written, "He still thinks this is a conversation. It's kind of adorable, honestly." Renata had responded with a single laughing emoji. The next 10 days moved fast, each one stacked carefully on the last. Common signed a Charlotte renewal contract he'd been holding for weeks, worth $180,000 over 18 months. Pretty's paralegal filed the growing case into 3 accordion folders, each one indexed by exhibit number in neat block lettering. Pretty confirmed the mediation date, the following Thursday. That evening, Common stood at the drafting table window looking out the retaining wall he'd poured with his own hands years earlier, visible from 2 houses down the block, still standing, still holding. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. The mediation room sat on the 9th floor of a downtown office building, a long conference table under gray. Even light, the city spread out silently through the tall windows behind it. Common and Pretty arrived 40 minutes early and laid out 3 folders in a precise line along the table, corners squared, tabs facing forward. When Ariana arrived with Renato Giaccu at her side, she was wearing the same blazer she wore for her biggest client pitches, confident, already glancing down at her phone as she took her seat. Pretty opened with a consulting contract first. $340,000 in non-marital earnings Ariana had dismissed for years as a hobby not worth mentioning in any filing. Ariana's smile flickered, but held. Then came the lottery purchase record. Rewards account ending in 4471. Retailer identification, matching Denny's Mini Mart, register 2. Ariana's attorney reached for her water glass and set it back down without drinking from it. Then came Renata's own billing memo, dated 6 full weeks before the drawing, time-stamped and notarized in the firm's own records. "I'd like to request a recess," Renata said quickly. "No," Pretty said, sliding the next folder into place without pausing. "We're not finished." Then came the text message, printed and placed face-up on the table between them. "He still thinks this is a conversation. It's kind of adorable, honestly." Ariana's composure cracked in a way Common had never once seen in 11 years of marriage. She looked at him, then really looked the way a person looks at something they have badly misjudged. For a moment, nobody in the room spoke. Renata flipped through the exhibit pages one more time, slower now, as though rereading them might change what they said. Ariana's hand found the edge of the table and gripped it, knuckles pale against the varnish. Whatever version of Common she'd built in her head over the last 11 years, useful, replaceable, unlikely to ever check the fine print, had just come apart in front of 6 exhibit tabs and a printed text message she never imagined anyone else would see. Common spoke directly to her, calm, his voice never rising once. "I supported everything you built. I asked for nothing in return. You were planning this while I was still driving Priya to the corner store every Sunday, buying grape soda and a ticket with my father's birthday on it. I need you to understand exactly who you decided to underestimate." He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked out without looking back. Pretty stayed behind to handle the rest of it, folder by folder. The collapse came in layers, each one distinct and unhurried. Legally, the State Lottery Commission suspended Ariana's original claim pending a formal ownership review, and within 3 weeks the full prize was reassigned to Common as the verified purchaser record, with a negotiated settlement of roughly 20% transferred to Ariana to close the matter cleanly and permanently. Common kept the Halsey courthouse outright. He was awarded primary custody of Priya, with Ariana receiving standard scheduled visitation. Professionally, Ariana's firm placed her on internal leave of absence once her attorney's billing records surfaced as part of the public court filing, drawing exactly the kind of scrutiny she had never planned for. The firm's compliance office quietly opened a broader review of her recent client accounts, unrelated to Common, but suddenly uncomfortably visible because of everything else now attached to her name. Personally, Renata Giaccu declined to continue representing her once-the-fee dispute over the mishandled claim went public, citing a conflict she hadn't disclosed earlier. Two of Ariana's closest friends, who it turned out had known about the plan for months and said nothing, stopped returning her calls once the details made their way through their shared social circle. The version of the life she had been quietly building in secret collapsed faster and more completely than the one she had tried to take from him. 14 months later, Common stood on the back porch in New House 3 Streets over in Fenwick Park, a house he had designed himself and built the retaining wall for stone by stone, on weekends, with Priya handing him tools from a bucket at his feet. Inside, she sat at the kitchen table doing homework, calling out multiplication problems for him to check while he flipped pancakes at the stove, the smell of butter and batter filling the whole downstairs. Benson Load Analysis LLC now employed 4 full-time engineers and had just signed a $2.1 million municipal bridge contract, the largest in the firm's short history. The kind of project that used to only come to firms with names Common had spent a career quietly outworking. His phone buzzed once that evening on the counter, a local news alert about a marketing executive facing an internal ethics review at her firm. He read the headline once, set the phone face down without another glance, and went back to checking Priya's math. "Dad, is that 8 times 7? Priya asked, tapping her pencil against the page. 56, he said, without looking up from the stove. "Check it again if you don't believe me." She grinned and wrote it down, and the pancake flipped clean in the pan, and neither of them thought about the phone on the counter again for the rest of the night. Standing on that porch a little later, looking out at the retaining wall he had built with his own 2 hands, Common felt nothing except quietly, completely free. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story.